Hi guys, what's up? Am I audible and visible to all? Hello everyone, what's up guys? Let me just do a very quick audio visual check and before we get started with the session, right? Okay. I'm audible and visible. So hi Arav and Shantanu. Hope you guys are doing well and everyone else who might be joining in this series. So CAT FAQs, questions or passage. I'll just give you a slight overview of this. CAT RC FAQs, questions or passage first. Uh, before we go into before we go any further, I would like to give you a slight, first of all, an introduction of myself. I'm, the person who's going to be taking you through these sessions. I'm Anupam Mishra. I'm from the batch of 2018. I'm left now. These are my CAT credentials, and there's other information and credentials that is mentioned about me on this particular slide. You can look through it. Now, I would like to start with discussing what exactly is the rationale behind coming up with this series. Okay, so I've been functioning as an educator for an academy for the CAT section for a while now, and we usually, as educators, we usually keep getting these queries from learners that, sir, we are facing this problem in accuracy. We are not able to attempt all the questions in an RC. We are not able to solve all the RCs in a section. Sometimes the questions are like, sir, should we be solving the passage? Should we be reading the passage first while solving an RC? Should we be reading the passage first, or should we go through the questions first? Then there are queries like, so what happens is every time I'm able to eliminate the out of the four options in any question, I'm able to eliminate the first two options. The last two options, I always end up selecting the wrong one, right? So basically, there is a series of very typical queries which I happen to come across quite often, and I use the adjective typical here, right? Typical, why? Because it's almost among these queries, there are certain queries which seem to be a problem for a majority of learners, a majority of people. Okay, so basically, I think it was this is a series or the series was long overdue. Something on these lines, something like, as you can see, the title I've given it, CAT RC FAQs Episode One. So RC obviously stands for Reading Comprehension, and FAQs are your frequently asked questions. So इसमें हमारा जो एजेंडा रहेगा आपका इस सेशन these sessions के लिए, the agenda that we're going to have for these will be basically, so whatever these general queries that we have, that generally learners have, like as I exemplified some of these before you, will take up every one of these queries in one episode. Every one episode, single episode will be about one query at a time. We will try to address it. Uh, we'll try to address it from a very rational and very structured point of view. That how should you go about, like we'll try to address the queries while providing you the reason and the methods and the steps that you need to undertake to address those problems and queries, right? Okay, so that's the rationale behind it. I'll give you some examples. For example, I'd recently floated a form to gauge what exactly are the problems that learners face these days when it comes to solving the RC. You can see I think you should be able to see the uh, this CD this PPT slide here, right? I hope this slide is visible. So I had recently floated a form to understand what are the problems that learners generally face when it comes to RCs, and I got these are the responses. So I in fact got a lot of responses, but when I distilled down all of these responses into a limited number of problems, the list that I was able to get here was this, right? So for example, the single question that I'm asked the most frequently, right, by almost every learner at least once, is this, that, sir, I get out of the four options that I attempt in any question, I'm able to eliminate. I'm very easily able to eliminate the first two options, and out of the remaining two options, I always end up selecting the wrong one. I always end up selecting the wrong one, right? So that's a query that almost every learner almost every learner that I've dealt with when while teaching for RC has some time or the other come up with, right? That's one query. Then there's another query that is quite frequent. That learners have this problem about should we be attempting the questions first or the passage first. Then there's a problem about, sir, we are not able to attempt all the RCs in the questions, right? In the PRC section. Then there's a concern about, sir, when I read, after reading the first paragraph, for example, let's say this is your RC, या अगर आपका एक RC का section, I'm sorry, excuse my drawing skills, guys. So let's suppose you have an RC here. Let's suppose you have an RC here. This is the first paragraph, and then you have the second paragraph. So learners generally have this queries that while I'm reading the first paragraph, I'm able to make sense of the first paragraph. But soon as I'm done with reading the first paragraph, when I come to the second paragraph, I almost forget all the content that I have read in the first paragraph. है ना? कि second paragraph पे आते आते आप first paragraph का content भूल चुके हो, है ना? So that's one more problem that generally I have seen learners to face quite often, and that's also something that we'll try to cater to here. उसको भी हम लोग यहाँ पे address करने का कोशिश करेंगे. I take too long to read passages. Now this relates to your reading speed and the speed at which you are able to comprehend the idea of the passage, right? तो ये चीज भी है, ये queries भी काफी बार आती हैं. Then they're not able to locate PORs. PORs, guys, by the way, is a reference, means point of references, right? So every question, many questions that are asked in your RCs, in your reading comprehension uh, section, are pertain sometimes to a specific parts of the passage, and that's what we call the pure point of references. So not able to locate PORs कि जब आंसर निकालना होता है तो हमें POR खोजने में दिक्कत होती है बहुत, right? That's one of the frequently asked question. End up spending too much time on some questions. I all right कि हाँ कोई कोई टाइम पे बहुत टाइम चला जाता है कोई कोई सवालों में, etc. Then there is, I always get the accept questions wrong. जहाँ पे भी वो question में आपको पता है, you have these, एक एक क्वेश्चन आता है कि हाँ all of the following except all of the following as per the passage are correct except, right? So I always get these except questions. I'm not able to make sense of long sentences. Have to go back to the passage many times. So basically, guys, this list that I have here is a list of, I almost call it I think I call it a Pareto list of problems that I've seen learners to face most often, and that's what we are going to address through this series, right? And this is the rationale of the series that we have. Okay, so let's move forward. So let's start with ओके. बाय द वे, अच्छा, इनको एड्रेस करने के लिए हमने काफी सारे इसमें वी आल्सो कम अप विद मेनी methods, approaches, tricks, if you might want to use the word, or tips that can be that can be used to address each one of these problems. For example, आप यहाँ पे देखिए, फॉर अब हर एक प्रॉब्लम के लिए मैंने एक सोल्यूशन यहाँ पे लिस्ट आउट करके रखा हुआ है. नाउ दीज आर द सॉल्यूशंस दैट आई हैव डेवलप्ड एंड डिराइव्ड ओवर दिस लास्ट ईयर व्हाइल वर्किंग विद लर्नर्स लाइक यू, जिनके साथ उन्होंने मुझसे प्रॉब्लम पूछा, मैंने सोचा कि अच्छा इसको कैसे हेल्प करना है, ठीक करना है. गिव देम अ कपल ऑफ सॉल्यूशंस. सम ऑफ देम वर्कड आउट, सम ऑफ देम gave better results, some of them gave even better results, etc., right? And out of all of that analysis, right, we have distilled down these solutions for each one of these problems. And that's exactly, the rationale behind this series. ये पूरा सीरीज का rationale यही है कि हर बार हम लोग कोई एक प्रॉब्लम उठाएंगे, उसको समझेंगे कि आप लोग एग्जैक्टली क्या चीज उसमें फेस करते हैं, एंड डिपेंडिंग ऑन दैट उसका क्या सोल्यूशन हो सकता है, हाउ शुड यू एड्रेस दैट, राइट? उसको हम लोग उठाएंगे. ठीक है, so that's about it. So let's start with the first problem that we'll be taking up. अच्छा, by the way, we won't necessarily go in the same order कि हाँ यहाँ पे first वाले से शुरू करके बाद में फिर second जाओगे, फिर third जाओगे, ऐसा नहीं होगा. We'll just take up whichever seems the most relevant and the most pressing query in that particular week. So recently जो मुझे query सबसे ज़्यादा आ रही है, that's mainly that learners have this query कि sir, RC करते समय पहले passage पढ़ना चाहिए, should I read the passage first or should I read the questions first? पैसेज पढ़ने आते तो बाद में पता नहीं बहुत जगह फंस जाते हैं, क्वेश्चंस पढ़ने जा रहे हैं तो बाद में वी आर नॉट एबल टू एड्रेस द मेन पॉइंट, समटाइम्स मेन आइडिया वाले क्वेश्चन नहीं हो पाते, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा, राइट? सो लेट्स डिस्कस दैट. लेट्स जस्ट ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड कि आरसी में पहले पैसेज पढ़ना चाहिए या फिर पहले क्वेश्चंस करने चाहिए. ठीक है, बहुत ही एकदम सिस्टमैटिकली डिस्कस करेंगे. विल कंसीडर बोथ द साइड्स ऑफ द इक्वेशन, लाइक हाँ अगर पैसेज पहले करो तो क्या होगा, फायदा इसमें क्या होगा. ठीक है, so इस चीज को समझने के लिए what I've done here is, guys, I've tried to create some a kind of a एक मैंने एक थोड़ा सा एक चीजी सा नाम बनाया है यहाँ पे. I call it the RC approach continuum, right? The RC approach continuum. So where so see one approach, एक आपका क्या अप्रोच होता है कि आपका एक बेसिक अप्रोच क्या होता है कोई भी चीज को करने का. वन बेसिक अप्रोच इज you go by the classical approach. The classical approach is where you have the passage. क्या करोगे आप passage में, आप सीधा you start with the passage. You don't look at the question. You just start with the very first line. ठीक है, आराम से पैराग्राफ, पहला फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ पढ़ा, फिर बाद में सेकंड पैराग्राफ, फिर थर्ड पैराग्राफ, लाइक वेरी सिस्टमैटिकली इन अ वेरी traditional way, if I may use the word, right? So the classical approach we generally have for many, one of the approaches is the classical approach, जहाँ पे आप पहले passage पढ़ते हैं ना, ठीक है। अब इसमें before we get any further, I want you to understand, I want to help you understand this diagram here. मान लीजिए ये जो आपकी लाइंस जो आपकी दिख रही है ना, दिस इज द, these lines are the content of the RC. ये जो आपकी लाइंस है, these are basically the content of the RC. ये आपके RC का content है, all of these lines. And the yellow points are, let's say, the points which are, like not really the core points of the RC, which don't really contain the gist of the RC. The green points are more near to the core of the RC, and the white line is basically that is the gist of the RC. ऐसा कुछ मान के चलो. I need these kind of classifications in terms of color so that I can help you understand कि what actually happens when you go by the passage first approach and what actually happens when you go by the what do you say, questions first approach. ठीक है? So and this ये जो आपको ये ब्लू सा ये फिल्टर दिख रहा है, ये जो पूरा ब्लू फिल्टर दिख रहा है ना यहाँ पे, दिस इज, ये मैंने यहाँ पे डिफाइन करके रखा हुआ है. इसका आई एम कॉलिंग दिस योर एरिया और स्पैन ऑफ फोकस, योर एरिया ऑफ फोकस, राइट? ठीक है. So when you go by the classical approach, जब आप क्या करते हैं, when you go by the approach where you read the passage first before going to the questions, one advantage is you read the passage, you read all the points of the passage exactly in the order that the author intended it to be. जिसने भी वो आर्टिकल या पैसेज लिखा हुआ है, वो जिस तरह से उसको प्रेजेंट करना चाहता था, आपने उसको वैसे ही समझा है ना. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, मान लीजिए कि मैं आपके सामने कोई आर्गुमेंट रखना चाह रहा हूँ. ओके, मैंने अपनी आर्गुमेंट, देयर इज अ वे इन व्हिच आई विल बिल्ड अप माय आर्गुमेंट, एंड द वे इन व्हिच आई बिल्ड अप माय आर्गुमेंट विल करस्पॉन्ड टू द पॉइंट आई एम ट्राइंग टू ड्राइव होम. जो मैं आप चीज समझाना चाह रहा हूँ, उसके हिसाब से मैं उसको बिल्ड अप करूंगा. अब आप मान लीजिए कि आप मेरा रिकॉर्डिंग लेके उसमें से रैंडम पार्ट उठा उठा के अगर पढ़ोगे, लाइक उसमें आप यू डोंट लिसन टू मी इन द ऑर्डर आई एम ट्राइंग टू एक्सप्रेस थिंग्स टू यू, आई एम ट्राइंग टू कन्वे द आइडिया. आप अगर उसी ऑर्डर में नहीं पढ़ते हो, आप बीच बीच में से अगर पार्ट्स उठा उठा के पढ़ रहे हैं, so there's a very good chance that you might just miss the main idea of what I was trying to convey, है ना? सेम चीज आपकी यहाँ पे पैसेज के अंदर होती है. So अगर if instead of going, so when you go by the passage like in the same order as the author intended it to be, there is a very good chance that you will be able to understand the gist of the passage very easily. मतलब there's very low probability कि आप उसमें कोई main point miss कर दे, unless of course it's because the language is too dense, the ideas are too abstract, or maybe let's say क्या कहें आपका ideas abstract है, या फिर language dense है, vocabulary difficult है, उसकी वजह से अगर मुश्किल हो रही है तो ठीक है, but at least you will not miss any major points, right? There's a good chance that you will get the main idea properly. That's one of the advantages of the classical approach. दूसरा advantage क्या है? अच्छा, so this is and that's the reason why this is especially good for answering second order questions. Second order questions क्या होते हैं? Second order questions, for example, you have your application questions, right? Application questions जैसे कि हो गए आपके कि which of the following is one of the assumptions that the author has made in the passage, right? Or so it's a second order. It's not a direct question. यहाँ पे आपको चीजें infer करनी पड़ रही है. You're having to think beyond what the author has directly mentioned in the passage, right? ठीक है? तो ये सेकंड ऑर्डर इन्फ्रेंस क्वेश्चंस हो गए, विच आर इनडायरेक्ट क्वेश्चंस, इन्फ्रेंस क्वेश्चंस. इन सबको आपको आंसर करने में आसानी रहेगी बिकॉज आप पैसेज का जस्ट अच्छे से समझ गए. सी गाइस, इन आरसीज, indirect questions, main idea questions, application questions, you'll be able to answer these properly only if you have understood the gist of the RC properly. If you have understood the RC on a very superficial level, it will be difficult for you to answer the second order question. आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा क्या हो रहा है. आप ठीक है, आपने तो बस वहां पे लैंग्वेज पढ़ी, आपने उसका आइडिया नहीं समझा उसके पीछे का, है ना? ठीक है, लेट्स कम टू द नेक्स्ट एडवांटेज. और questions that draw inference or conclusions basis MPORs. MPORs का मतलब, POR is basically point of reference, MPOR मतलब multiple point of references. देखिए बहुत बार क्या होता है कि you have some questions which need you to refer to, which derive their answers from multiple points in the passage. So there are questions which are about the whole passage, like main idea questions. What is the primary purpose of the passage, like that. There are questions which are about some specific part of the passage. Ki, what has the author said in the second paragraph? What does the author mean when he says this in the second paragraph? That's a specific single point of reference passage. Question. And sometimes you have questions which refer to multiple point of reference in the passage, right? For example, which of the following is not true as per the author? तो इसमें से आपको हर एक ऑप्शन को चेक करना पड़ेगा, and every option might come from a different part of the passage, right? So So classical approach. So classical approach is also helpful when you're answering, conclusion, MP or multiple point of reference questions, and etc. 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 However, there is a disadvantage. कि disadvantage ये है कि there is a risk of getting lost in the text or wasting time on trivial content. अब इसमें ऐसा क्या होगा कि बहुत बार क्या होगा कि there might be some, देखो पैसेज के हर एक पार्ट पे से एक सवाल आता है ऐसा नहीं है. Okay. So there might, मान लीजिए कि there is some part of the passage which is quite dense. कोई एक part आ गया जो कि बहुत ही dense है, इसको समझना बहुत ही मुश्किल है. Like it has really abstract ideas and really difficult vocabulary, and moreover, it also doesn't really have any question that that has been asked from that relating to that part of the passage. उस part से कोई question ही नहीं पूछा गया है. But because you have not seen the questions earlier, you'll give the same amount of importance and weightage to that part, and आप उसको पढ़ने में time waste करते रहेंगे, है ना. तो यहाँ पे this is one of the disadvantages of the classical approach. ठीक है. अभी हम लोग देखते हैं कि आपका ये दूसरा वाला जो tactical approach है वो क्या होता है. What is your tactical approach? For this I might have to move my what do you say picture here. Just give me a second. एक मिनट इसको मूव कर देता हूँ तो ये आप क्लियर हो जाएगा. Yeah, I think this is better. Huh? From current slide. Yeah. So the second approach is the tactical approach. The tactical approach is when you look at the questions first. आप पहले questions देखते हो, है ना? When you look at the questions first. ठीक है. So questions first में क्या फायदा है कि you spend less time on the content that does not relate to the questions. Let's say कि ये जो green वाला part है that उसके से सवाल पूछे गए हैं. The yellow parts are the parts from where the question have not been asked. You'll just spend time on the parts which are more relevant because questions have been directly asked from that part, right? It allows for a way better sense of urgency. A sense of urgency is basically is the opposite of getting lost in the passage. When you are oriented towards your question palette, कि आपको पता है कि आपके पास इतना टाइम बचा है, आपको जल्दी करना है. Okay, you don't get lost in the passage. That's basically your sense of urgency. Can generally be less time consuming. तो ये सारे these are the advantages of this, right? These are the advantages of this. Disadvantage क्या है? Disadvantages are these. इसका disadvantage basically ये है that you might just miss the gist of the passage sometimes because आप पूरा passage exactly you're not reading it in the order that the author intended you to read, right? So that's the disadvantage of the tactical approach. So क्या करना चाहिए? What should be the solution? Should you go by the classical approach? Do you go by the tactical approach? Which approach do we go by? What do you think? Well, I'll tell you. Let's take an example. एक example लेते हैं. मान लो ये आपके सामने मैंने एक आरसी यहाँ पे रखा हुआ है. आप kept an RC in front of you. This is an RC that was asked in CAT 2018 का. ये slot A का RC आपके सामने जो मैंने रखा है. ठीक है. This was asked in your CAT 2018 slot A, and just have a look at this. Right? This was the passage contemporary internet shopping वाला आपका एक passage था. इसको अगर आप देखो, इसमें जो क्वेश्चंस देखिए, just have a look at these questions. Based on the passage, all of the following can be inferred about consumer behavior except that. अब मुझे ये बताइए, if we go by let's say the tactical approach, जहाँ पे आप questions पहले पढ़ रहे हैं, passage आप बाद में देख रहे हैं, ठीक है, tactical हो जहाँ पे आप question पहले पढ़ रहे हो. So what will you do in case of this question? The idea of reading the questions first is what? That once you read the question, you know what topics you should be focusing on when you read the passage, right? Question पहले पढ़ लिया तो पता चल गया कि अच्छा हाँ भाई मेरे को ये 1 2 3 टॉपिक में मेरे को ध्यान देना है passage पढ़ने के पहले, है ना? ठीक है. So based on this passage, all of the following can be inferred. तो इस क्वेश्चन में आप क्या करेंगे? आपके पास तो चार ऑप्शन पड़े हैं. Okay. Will you try to remember each and everything that is mentioned in each and every one of these options? आप हर एक चीज को याद करने जाओगे? Okay, चलो मान लो आपने कर भी लिया. उसके बाद नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन पढ़ो. A new food brand plans to launch a series of products in the American market. Which of the following product plans is most likely to be supported by the author of the passage? Range of 10 products priced between $5 and $10, 25 products priced between $5 and $10, etc., 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 etc. Now this is an application question. ये आपका application question है. You won't be able to make any sense of it unless you have read the passage, right? So reading the questions first. देखो third और fourth में तो कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ. Let's look at the next. एक और question देखते हैं इसका. Which of the following hypothetical statements would add the least depth to the author's prediction of the fate of startups offering new product options? Again, this is again an application question. This also requires you to understand the main idea of the passage properly, right? The main idea or the main argument. You can answer this question properly only if after you have understood the main idea, right? So basically what I'm trying to say that for this question again देखो एक और सवाल देख लो same passage I'm looking at the same passage मैं एक ही passage की बात कर रहा हूँ ठीक है. This was a passage that was asked in CAT 2018 slot number 2. ये question देखिए इसका second question देखिए. All of the following are if true would weaken the author's claims except. Now are you after reading the questions are you going to try to remember points from each one of these options? कितने कितने क्वेश्चन बचे आपके पास एक दो तीन तीन क्वेश्चन आपके एक्सेप्ट वाले आ रहे हैं. So are you going to try and remember 3 into 4 that is 12 plus 2 more questions plus 2 more so almost 14 points. Are you going to try and remember 14 different points and then start reading the passage and then start looking for कौन से points हैं? Doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make any sense at all, correct? So the tactical approach so far as this particular passage or these type of questions are concerned is useless here. It does not really help you if you try to go for अगर आप सारे पढ़ने जाओ. ठीक है ये हमने कौन सा केस देखा ये हमने फर्स्ट केस देखा. दिस वाज अ केस ए. लेट्स कंसीडर केस बी नाउ. हम लोग सेकंड केस देखते हैं एक बार. केस बी रुको रुको आई विल जस्ट गेट यू द राइट करेक्ट स्लाइड हियर. केस बी देखिए इसमें. केस बी में एक बार इसकी क्वेश्चन देखते हैं. Each, according to the author, service delivery in Indian education can be improved. This was a passage that was asked in again same CAT 2018. इसमें पूछा था. Improved in all of the following ways except what? So again यहाँ पे भी आपको this is also a multiple point of reference. इनको क्या बोला जाता है? Multiple point of reference questions. What are multiple point of reference questions? Where you're required to check each and every option from the passage. हर एक option के लिए आपको पैसेज में जाके चेक करना पड़ेगा कि ये ऑप्शन कहाँ पे ये ऑप्शन कहाँ पे ये ऑप्शन कहाँ पे. सो ऐसे क्वेश्चन में क्वेश्चन को पहले पढ़ने का कोई फायदा नहीं है. देयर इज नो यूज ऑफ रीडिंग द क्वेश्चन फर्स्ट. लेट्स लुक एट द सेकंड क्वेश्चन. सेकंड क्वेश्चन में देखो ये थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट है. सेकंड क्वेश्चन आपका थोड़ा सा अलग है. In the context of the passage, we can infer that the title Band-Aids on a corpse in paragraph 2 suggests that. Now, in case of this question, इस question के case में, you have been given a very specific point of reference. What do we call this? We call these questions single point of reference questions. इसको क्या कहते हैं हम लोग? Single point of reference questions. Okay. Why? Because these are, for example, ये जो आपका है, ये आपका, I think this is derived from this part. The study's title says it all. Band-aids on a corpse, right? This is so for all intents and purposes, the answer to this question will be found in this area. आपको ये वाले पार्ट में इसका आंसर मिल जाएगा. So this is your single point of reference. Single point of reference question है आपका. यहाँ पे it might actually be of some value if you read the question first. अगर आपने क्वेश्चन पढ़ लिया कि अच्छा bandits of the corpse के बारे में ध्यान रखना है, right? So when you read, if you read the question first and you're going through the RC, you can try to quickly go through the rest of the parts of the RC. बाकी part of RC का आप जल्दी जल्दी करेंगे. You try to go through the rest of the parts of the RC very quickly. When you come to this part, you'll try to go a little slow. यहाँ पे आप थोड़ा सा slow जाना चाहेंगे, right? You'll try to go a little slow here. कि यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा आराम से पढ़ेंगे इसको, because you know that there is a question that has been asked here, right? So there is some value here when it comes to SPOR questions. वैल्यू टू द टैक्टिकल अप्रोच जहां पे आप क्वेश्चंस पहले पढ़ रहे हो अगर सिंगल पॉइंट ऑफ रेफरेंस क्वेश्चन आता है. इसके और क्वेश्चन देख लीजिए. ये भी दिस इज आल्सो अ सिंगल पॉइंट ऑफ रेफरेंस क्वेश्चन. ये भी आपका एसपीआर क्वेश्चन है इसके अंदर. दिस इज आल्सो सो राइट. दिस क्वेश्चन इज आल्सो सिंगल पॉइंट ऑफ रेफरेंस क्वेश्चन. मेन पर्पस ऑफ द क्वेश्चन ये तो आपका दिस इज डिपेंडेंट ऑन द होल पैसेज. तो आपको ये यहाँ पे आपको क्वेश्चन पढ़ के कोई बड़ा फायदा नहीं है. Which of the following if true would undermine the passage's main argument, right? So again you need to know the passage's main argument. So the point is what I'm trying to the point I'm trying to drive home here is that for passages jahan pe where you have more multiple point of reference questions, it's better to go by the classical approach. And the passages where you have more single point of reference questions, it's better to go by the tactical approach, right? The tactical approach being jahan pe aap question pehle padhte hain. The classical approach being where you read the passages first, right? Where you read the passage first. Even better. Now there is something that can be even better than this. एक चीज हो सकती है जो आपकी इससे भी ज्यादा better हो सकती है. What is that? What will that be? That will basically be the ideal approach. The approach which is neither the classical approach nor the tactical approach. क्या उसका मतलब क्या है कि पैसेज भी नहीं पढ़ो और and questions भी नहीं पढ़े. नहीं, it's not like that. So the ideal approach is basically, so when you're reading the passage, see, the ideal approach says that you start with reading the questions first. ठीक है? You start with reading the questions first, but not pay equal attention to all of them. सारे सवालों पे सेम अटेंशन देना ऐसा नहीं है, राइट? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर मैं अब आपको मैं एग्जाम्पल, जो सेकंड वाले केस का हम लोग एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं, ये वाला जो एग्जाम्पल है, ये केस बी है। केस बी में आप देखो, आई जस्ट मार्क दिस विद कलर्स, इसको मैं कलर से, अलग अलग कलर से मार्क करता हूँ। मार्क इट विद so the question that you're required to pay attention to, I'm going to mark them in white. So this is a question that is a multiple point of reference question, तो इसको हम लोग ध्यान नहीं देंगे, but this is a single point of reference question, तो ये question पे आप ध्यान दोगे, you'll take this, ये question हम लोग उठा लेंगे। Next, question number 3, again single point of reference question, इस पे भी आप ध्यान दोगे, you'll read this question as well। Question number 4, it's a general idea question, there is no really, not really any point in reading this question, तो आप question number 4 को नहीं पढ़ोगे। Question number 5 is again a general point question, तो आप question number 5 को भी नहीं देखोगे। So out of the 5 questions that we had for this passage, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, the only ones that you'll read, the only ones that you'll go through when you're reading the questions first, will be question number 2, question number 3, and probably question number 1. Sorry, probably, yeah, that's question number 2 and question number 3, that's it. Question number 2 and question number 3. You will not waste time in question number 1, question number 4 and question number 5. Why? The reason is because those are multiple point of reference questions. If you end up wasting time on them, there's anyways no use, उसका वैसे भी कोई फायदा नहीं है, उतनी चीजें आप याद नहीं रख सकते, आप हर एक ऑप्शन नहीं याद रख सकते, समझे? So the ideal approach basically says that, just this, that sift through the questions very quickly, फटाफट questions देखो, take notice of single point of reference questions. Only take notice of single point of reference questions. Try to remember them in a dormant sense. Wait, don't try to make some sort of a list or anything कि हाँ ठीक है इसका लिस्ट बना लिया कि हाँ भाई ये चीजें ध्यान में रखनी है, अब क्वेश्चन जब आप पैसिव पढ़ने जाएंगे तो try to match everything. No, we don't do that. Just try to have a sense of them in a dormant sense. When you start reading the passages very quickly, and जब भी automatically when you come across the content which relates to one of the single point of reference questions that you have read, your attention will automatically slow down, वहां पे अपने आप slow हो जा रहा है, उसके बाद फिर read that part carefully and answer that question, right? So basically take notice of SPORs. Do not waste time on multiple point of reference questions, यहाँ पे जरा भी समय waste नहीं करना है, okay? ठीक है, get back to the passage and read it with urgency, right? Go step through the questions quickly. First step, second step, single point of reference questions आप पढ़ेंगे ध्यान से, multiple point of reference questions पे आप जरा भी time waste नहीं करोगे। You get back to the passage, read it with some sort of urgency, right? Let the dormant single point of references turn up by themselves. Don't start just looking, and don't go by what I call the search and solve strategy. एक बहुत बार क्या करते हैं लोग कि वो सर्च एक पॉइंट मिल गया, आप उसको खोजने लग जाए कि वो कहाँ पे लिया भाई। No, that's not an ideal approach in every scenario. Yes, there are situations where it is required. For example, मान लीजिए आपके पास you just have like 2 minutes remaining and you have like one complete RC left, एक पूरा RC बचा हुआ है आपके पास सिर्फ 2 मिनट बचे हुए हैं। Then it's okay कि हाँ आप एक single point of reference वाला question देख लीजिए and you go for a search and solve strategy. You search for the point of reference and you try to understand, make sure that you understand the point of reference properly, and then you go back to the question and solve it, right? So that the search and solve strategy for SPRs makes sense only in a very desperate scenario, right? Where you don't have hardly any time, you have hardly any time remaining, and you're trying to, what do you say? And you have to solve the whole RC. अब पूरा तो हो नहीं सकता, जितने direct question है वही कर लो, right? So, right. So this is, guys, this is your answer. This will be my answer to this one question that is asked so often by so many people, by so many students, that should we attempt the question first, or should we attempt the RC first, right? It's neither. दोनों में से कोई भी नहीं है, as usual. And once you get started to get into a B school, you'll understand that most of the questions don't really have such straightforward answers. It always depends on what situation you are in. If you're in a situation where the RC has more single point of reference questions, well, read those questions, go back to the RC and start solving. If you're in a situation where the RC has more multiple point of reference questions, there's no point reading the questions. Start with the RC, right? So you have to find that ideal approach depending on the kind of questions that you have been asked in the RC. All right. So that's about it, guys. And yeah, I hope I was able to add at least a tiny bit of value to via this 30-minute episode. We'll come up with the next installment of this soon, in a couple of days. Hopefully, let's say tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Let's see. Okay. By the way, if there are any other questions that you might have, Okay, you can obviously put them out in the comment section. उसको आप comment section में डाल सकते हैं. And I will definitely look at the comment section every now and then, and I'll try to. And if I come across some query which happens to be relevant to a majority of learners, I'll definitely try to incorporate that into the, well, CAT RCFAQ series. Okay, so that was CAT RCFAQs episode one. We'll keep coming up with more episodes for you, and yeah, till then, keep safe, take care, and एक महीना बचा है, दौड़ लीजिए जितना दौड़ सकते हैं, right? Just 1 month before your exam. So all right, wish you well. I'll see you later. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Good night.